Hi there, thanks for stopping by. In today's video, I'm going to show you 3 different ways to add edging to your Dorset buttons. I'm going to show you 2 scallop designs and 1 with a knotted design. So let's get started. There are many different ways that you can add decorative edges to your Dorset ring buttons. The methods that I'm going to show you today to create scalloped edges can be worked either on a button that you've already slicked the edge, that is, you've turned that blanket stitch to the back, or they can be worked on buttons that you've left the blanket stitch standing proud on the edge. If you're working them on the non-slicked edge, you will probably want to use a sharp needle because it is best to actually bring your thread up through the ridge, and obviously it will depend upon how tight your blanket stitch ridges are, how easy that is. So that much of that will depend upon your own techniques. So for this first technique, this first method, I've threaded a long length of cotton perle onto a needle singly and fastened it at the back. I'm going to now work a series of blanket stitches, and I'm going to work these at the center of each of my spokes. That just helps for placement. You can do them as close or as far away as you wish. I wouldn't do them too far away, but obviously on some larger buttons you may want to put 2 into a space and so on. I am working with quite a small button. As I reach the first stitch, what I like to do is bring the needle from the back to the front, crossing underneath that first knot that's being created. That closes the circle and just helps keep everything neat and tidy. For the second row, I'm now going to take the thread and simply wrap around the ridge, and this will help to make the ridge thicker. So it's a good idea to sort of count how many wraps you've done if you can. It's not the end of the world if you can't. And another thing to remember is, as your threads, just like when you're working a Dorset button, as your threads start to kink up like this, hold up by the needle and let that twist spin out. And that will stop you getting tangles, and it will also keep your thread looking nice, so it keeps the sheen of the thread. So I'm going to do this. Yep. I nearly did a blanket stitch then. I'm going to do this all of the way around just to thicken up this ridge. I've gone all of the way around now, and that's just thickened it up nicely. Now I'm going to work a series of blanket stitches into this ridge, and it's a good idea to try to work the same number on every section as you go along. Try not to have your stitches too tight, as in when you pull this way, when you're pulling up, they just seem to look better if they're not really tight knots. But they do need to be pushed in close next to each other. there is 6 stitches worked. Now, before I go on to the next section, I'm going to bring my needle from behind, underneath, and that just helps to bring the scallop down. And then I'm going to carry on and work the next section. I've come all of the way around, working each as previously. To finish off, and again to ensure that that scallop remains, it's a good idea, if you can, to just take your thread through the first stitch to the back. And that pulls down that last scallop nicely. And then you can just fasten off. You can either knot your scallop through the top here, or if your design allows, take it through to the back, whichever best suits you. Trim that close. So with this method, because you've gone around and wrapped the row first and then worked the scalloped stitches, it creates a slightly thicker section just before the ridge of the blanket stitch. Because it is in one line, you can sometimes find that you get what appears to be a little bit of an overlap. So that one will go behind and then the next one will come in front. So it will have a little bit of a wavy appearance on some buttons, depending on how close you have your scallops. But it's a nice option because you're working round and round. The second method perhaps gives a little bit more pronounced scallops, and these are worked in a slightly different way. Again, you can still use an unslicked button, but make sure that you form your blanket stitches through the ridge. So for this, we're going to work one blanket stitch, and then we're going to work a blanket stitch into this last stitch. Now you do have to hold this thread taut when you do it. So I'm just going to tuck that down there so that my fingers aren't actually covering if I can help it. So I'm going to come through again. I want that one to be tight. Now what that's actually doing is that's locking that stitch so it's not going to slip. And then I'm going to come back and bring my needle from the back to the front, and I'm coming under that little stitch there that crosses over, and now I'm going to do my blanket stitches. So I've worked 7 in this one. You can also, if you wish, put a gauge, a stick or a thick needle into there to make larger scallops in this particular method. Don't go too big, it can be difficult to control. Now I'm just going to repeat. So I will do a I'll do a blanket stitch in. Now this can, in actual fact, I'm going to put that in the wrong place. So I'm going to put it right up against this one. And then I will come over for the next. And again, work a blanket stitch here to lock this. Then I can bring the thread back, come underneath, and go ahead and work another blanket stitches, another 7 of them onto this ridge. And I'll carry on and do the rest of those. Again, a little bit of kinking, as you'll always get with the blanket stitches, and so just make sure that you hold up and do your little twirls. I've gone all of the way around, and for the last stitch, it's on this particular one, it's really simple because you're just working through the last. So exactly the same as before, we're making one, I'm going to butt that stitch up to the first, work a stitch, come back, and then work the blanket stitches. And at the very end, in order to keep that nice scallop, I like to come through as if I was going to create another stitch. So that pulls the scallop down, but then go back, and if you can split through the stitch, but you don't need to. But I've gone through the next scallop just to take it to the back of the button, and then I can fasten off with a knot, or I can take it down. It depends on if your design allows you to take it down and not be seen. If it doesn't, go ahead and just place a knot at the back. And then trim that close. So with this particular method, you can see that you have 2 stitches in between every one of the scallops. Obviously, if they're the same color as your whatever you've covered the ring, you're not going to see those at all. This next version is one that you probably haven't seen before. I find that it works very well on an unslicked edge, so that is through the ridge of the blanket stitch, but it does also work if you're just going around the complete ring as the previous 2. Now to get started, I've knotted the thread, fastened it, and I've come up with 1 small blanket stitch. I'm going to come over and work another, just spaced out. Okay, now in that stitch I'm going to work a knotted stitch. So I'm going to come the front, behind, so front, behind, and the front again, okay? And then ease that through. And then I'm going to do that again in the same space in between. Because I'm trying to keep my fingers out of the way, these are loose compared to what they should be. But if you can do them a little bit tighter, you'll feel better about it. And then I'm going to come over. Oops. Nearly went round. I'm going to come over and I'm going to place the next blanket stitch. And then I'm going to repeat. So I've gone around full circle on this particular method, and for the last stitch, if you take the actual stitch through the first one, and then you can work your knotted stitches through that as well. And then for the last stitch, come back down and tuck your thread underneath the main section. And that will take you then to the back where you can go ahead and fasten. If your design allows, you can come down to the actual back. If it doesn't, just go ahead and trim it off close. So this design is, as I say, a little bit different and adds a little bit of extra texture. If you happen to change direction of your wraps halfway, you will get a situation where it doesn't quite match, which is what I did here. Instead of wrapping around this way, I wrapped around that way. So do try to be consistent when you're working in order to get the little textured edge. Now, of course, this particular edge probably works best if the colors do match. In this one, if it was matched right up, it would just be some more texture along the edge of this button. So there's something else to think about. Thanks very much for watching. Do please click like, hit subscribe, click the notification bell, and do leave me comments. They all help the channel. And this video was a result of special requests through comments. So you never know, I might be able to help. So until the next time, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.